Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Elena Christopher with HFS Research. I'm really excited to bring you a great webinar today, essentially a Blue Prism RPA Customer Spotlight with a strong emphasis of getting beyond the hype. I've actually just come back. I spent the last 3 days in Vegas it was actually the UiPath Forward event. But it just really puts a fine point on something we put out there in a blog about a week or so ago, which is what do the RPA software companies need to do to really help drive transformation in the marketplace. And one of the key elements is it's not so much about counting your customers, but it's about what your customers are achieving, really the scale within those customers. And if we do nothing else today, that's really what we hope to touch on. But I've got a great set of enterprise panelists with us today, as well as a great spokesperson from Blue Prism. But why don't we do a quick round of introductions? Sebastian, I'd love to pop over to you for quickly introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm Sebastian Whelan. I'm the executive head of the cognitive automation at Old Mutual and been on the journey for about 18 months. No background in robotics or any intelligent automation, and yeah, happy to share our journey this afternoon.
Superb. Thank you, Sebastian from Old Mutual. Maciej, let's go over to you from Arla Foods, please.
Yes, my name is Maciej Buchowski. I am the product manager of the process automation department in Arla Foods, and I'm heading the whole agenda of rapid automation for our company. My background is actually business process automation. I've never done anything apart from that, starting with these macro scripts and going into computer science, and now heading the RPA agenda. In Arla Foods, we are doing this since 2016.
Super. Thank you, Maciej. Karsten, let's go over to you from Henkel, please.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Carsten Wenske. I'm the robotic process automation consultant here. Working since 2.5 years with robotics. That's where we started off with Blue Prism, and 1 year before, in 2016, our group already started with some POCs. I'm now happy to join you today here.
Superb. Thank you for that, Karsten. And last but not least, Peter, let's pop over to you.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Walker. I'm the regional CTO in EMEA. Mine is a fairly unique story, I guess, having only ever worked for one company, which is Blue Prism, except perhaps for a brief stint at McDonald's one summer. So I have a little joke that I share with people, having moved from the Golden Arches to Blue Prism, that my rule in life is only ever to work for companies that have a color and a shape in the name. I'll just quickly help you understand my background. I've worked in software development at Blue Prism, so I have a strong understanding of the product and a strong emotional attachment to it. Also, I've worked in professional services, so I really truly understand what it takes to deploy RPA and make it successful. And I moved through different roles then through pre-sales consulting, analyst relations, and I have a new role now at Blue Prism as regional CTO as of this summer.
Super. Thank you for that, Peter. And that's just given where we are with the automation marketplaces, it's fascinating that you've been on this journey with Blue Prism for about 14 years now. Okay.
It's been quite a ride, yeah.
Okay. So before we get started, a few guidance points for our participants. We've got a great range of enterprises on the phone today. At HFS, we're obviously a research house. We love to bring people together to have conversations, but we obviously do a lot of writing. So I wanted to let everyone know that's joining us that we have POV reports that we put together on some of the customer stories you'll hear today. Unfortunately, Owen O'Reilly from MetLife was not able to join us today, but there is a great case study on MetLife's journey. We've got a story on Henkel. We've just published a POV on the Arla story, and then Old Mutual will be coming your way in November. And these are all, given the HFS model, we're very active believers in sharing in order to really facilitate the conversation and the learning in the marketplace. So these all of these are in front of our firewall, part of our freemium approach. And so as I like to say, for just the low price of your email ID, you have access to these. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we dive into content. in order to allow all of these great panelists to share some of their learnings and viewpoints with you today, none of our participants will have audio capabilities, but we really do want to hear from you. So if you look at the icons at the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll find one that says Q&A. If you click on that button, you can essentially submit your questions through the chat function. All of us panelists actually will see those as we go through the webinar today. We'll do our best to answer them as we go, but I will endeavor to save about 5 minutes at the end of the session to try and address some of your Q&A. But just really want to emphasize that we really want to hear from you. So let's talk a bit about what we're going to cover today. So I mentioned we're trying to get beyond the hype. There's still loads of hype in the RPA marketplace. There's loads of talk around how companies are perhaps not scaling and why, but there's also lots of great opportunity. So we're going to dive into this. We'll cover a few different topics. We'll look at the importance of why. One of our observations have been that some of the enterprises that are doing well with their automation programs is because it's not technology for technology's sake. There's a real sense of purpose and overarching unifying business driver. Then we'll talk about how, well, in actuality, RPA technology is pretty good, and talk a bit about why perhaps it's the process and the people that is the lion's share of the hard work. And then we'll move from that to talk about digital change management, just like we say here. What the heck is that, and how do we do it? And then we'll move on to balancing out IT skills and business context and talk a little bit about this concept of citizen developers. What are they, and do they actually exist, and how do we cultivate them? And then of course we'll end on what's most important of all, achieving scale and what are real benefits here. And then we'll go on to questions. So a little bit about HFS. Many of you who join our webinars tend to know who we are in the marketplace. Essentially, we often get called the voice of automation, which is a very kind kudo. But it's definitely one of the elements that we look at with our overarching theme of trying to really have our finger on the pulse of defining future business operations, what are enterprises doing to truly drive their own change and transformation. And that's really this element at the top. One of our key concepts is the digital one office, which is essentially leveraging all of the great technology and change to achieve the one office, which breaks down silos within enterprises, and our related concept of the hyper-connected enterprise, which is how it can't just be about your enterprise. It's also increasingly about how your enterprise interfaces with a much broader ecosystem. It's essentially our answer to the question of what's the end state if you achieve digital transformation. And the way that we support that is we look at research along the lines of change agents. Today's conversation about RPA is in line with our change agent research. We also look at the different functions within enterprises in terms of how they're changing and how they're transforming, like shared services centers or cybersecurity. And then we also look firmly at the world through the industry lens. So I'll make note that we have a nice complement of industries on this call today. And then we do that, we wrap this all up with our research around data and such. But this is just a quick snapshot of who HFS is as we've evolved in the marketplace. And I think I'm not going to drain this full slide, but I think the first, middle, and third points are just really what I always hope that people take away when they think about what is HFS all about. This point, we believe in sharing research, and I know some of the panelists will talk today about the kind of evolving viewpoint of ecosystem. It's not just your partners. Sharing among your peers is really important. In a growing and changing marketplace, as we're all trying to determine the benefits of automation, for example, we're much stronger if we work together and share our perspectives. That's very much a core philosophy of what we're trying to do at HFS, and that's why at least 60%, if not more, of our research is actually available free, again, for the low price of your email address. And we really try and provide that voice of the customer. All of the different suppliers and vendors that we talk to, it's their job to be able to clearly articulate their value proposition, but the people we really want to talk to are the customers. That's why we've got great enterprises on the line today. And then lastly, we're not going to do lots of features and functions of technology. It's all about the applied technology. And so what we're perhaps best known for in the marketplace is sort of tying it back to our reputation as being the voice of automation. It all started back in 2012. and where my CEO, Phil Fursch, and Peter's CEO, Alistair Bathgate, there's some mythology around this. I always sort of picture it. It, of course, perhaps happened in a pub, but they basically co-invented the term RPA. And the first time we wrote about it was back in November of 2012. And RPA, in many of the ways how RPA vendors pitched it initially, was it is in fact a way that you actually could further lower your costs. You could go get more cost effective than offshore outsourcing. Thus our concept of Robotic and what's become this pretty epic and well-known blog. Flash to 7 years later, we say maybe it's the 7-year itch, or I perhaps wildly inappropriately say maybe it's the 7-year bitch, just meaning 7 years on, we're starting to get to the point where we're complaining about, well, is RPA actually doing much for us? Are we really gaining anything with RPA? Because there's so much hype around RPA in the marketplace. I always like to say it's software. It's not a panacea. But we put out this blog, RPA is Dead, Long Live Integrated Automation Platforms, which if anyone got beyond the title, the core message of this piece is all about how you have to use any of these tools, RPA, et cetera, as an opportunity or a conduit to help your enterprise drive transformation. The tool itself is not going to do it for you, and no singular tool ever can do it for you, but it can open the door to great opportunities. And we also like to state that if you're not taking that opportunity to really at least optimize, if not reinvent or even create new processes, then that's a dramatic missed opportunity. So I give you some of those introductory comments to really set the stage for the conversation today, and would love to dive in now, and we're going to talk a bit, bring in our panelists and talk a bit about what these guys are doing to really get benefit from both RPA and their automation programs. So what I want to start with is my esteemed panel. They did a great job of giving brief introductions, but let's take a few moments to let these guys talk about their businesses. I think of this as kind of the let's get to know the enterprises section. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we've noticed in our research that some of the enterprises that seem to be finding success with their automation programs have a great sense of overarching purpose, and I call it the importance of why, that value of the unifying business driver. But I'd love to use this as a lens, because what we've got up here, we've got sort of Henkel has their Henkel 2020 program, which is all about driving, I mean, for all of these, it's all about driving the strategy for each of the companies. Arla, you have Calcium. Old Mutual, you have your 8 tenants. But I'd like you guys to each take a minute and go through, not so much to explain the strategy, but to talk about why it's important to have a unifying business driver that helps articulate your mission. Karsten, I'd love to start with you from Henkel to talk a little bit about this concept of the importance of why, if you will.
Yeah, sure. So for Henkel, right, automation is all over the place. So we try to automate it as much as possible. It ties into the strategy, but that one I think you can read. So when we started automation, it was all about how can we digitalize and transform our shared service centers, which contains 3,000 employees worldwide in 7 different locations. So we wanted to get rid of all this transactional work, copy and paste. These easy tasks are basically tedious. People were leaving due to the work they did because they didn't really like it. It was every day the same. And that's why with automation, we being able to provide them easier, or not easier, better work, and they can actually use their brains and not only the fingers. It's all about the people and not so much a cost-saving program for us as well. Gaining efficiency and optimization of costs is obviously one driver as well.
I mean, very key points, Karsten, because it's interesting. It's one of the, I know one of the myths that we always try and bust about the RPA market is that it's all about replacing people. And so I respect that a key part of your statement and comments just then was it's actually about uplifting people, if you will. Machi, how about you from the Arla Foods perspective? What's the importance of having this unifying business driver, and how do you actually tie that back to your automation program?
Yes, so just to put it in perspective, Arla Foods is a company that is trying as much as it can to be as innovative and into the future as possible. So RPA AI is one thing. We are a company that we actually are a dairy cooperative, and we are one of the biggest dairy cooperatives in the world right now. And dairy cooperatives don't usually get this big due to how they are structured. So in order to be competitive, we, for example, have our farmers have applications on their mobile apps just to see how their cows are doing. We are able to actually using AI foresee how much milk all of the cows will give us in the next couple of days. These are sort of the crazy ideas that we have and we try to implement to be competitive. And we have a lot of these initiatives, but in order to not have them separated in different parts of the business. So, okay, we can do RPA for the shared service center. Somewhere else, we can do something innovative, and nobody knows actually what the others are doing. We actually have a combined strategy. First, we started with good growth, which was putting emphasizing the digitalization of the company, and starting with initiatives like API and AI. And currently, we have a global strategy called Calcium, which promised to bring a lot of cost savings, but by reducing complexity, by improving the way we are working, and not by sort of traditional ways of cost cutting. So having this strategy is really important for us, because we are not providing RPA and AI only. Okay, we have some manual tasks, we can automate them, we can do some manual work reduction, and these people, we also do this. These people are then doing more creative tasks. But what the importance is in our team is problem solving. So we can automate 20 simple manual tasks, but we can then go and solve a particular problem. Like one person actually came to us and said, okay, we are throwing a lot of milk and yogurts in the US and Canada. And that is not really a process that you would think of RPA at the beginning, but it was a problem. So then we went in, analyzed the process, found out what is not working in the back office process, and we fixed it using technology. And RPA was a big part of that, and we solved that problem. So we need this strategy, and that is because we know what other innovations are in the company. We are not only putting as many robots as we can, but we are trying to solve real business problems that people every day have, and not only for task automation. And this strategy put all of our innovators in the company together, so we can work as a whole and not just separate initiatives.
Super. Thank you for that detailed answer, Damachi. One of the things I like about some of the elements you drew out there is just reminding us that it always has to be about solving business problems. Some of my comments around how you need to take that opportunity to really look for the processes that can be optimized, but sometimes it's just really understanding what the problem is so you can get to it. And something tying it back to milk production, for example, there's nothing more core to your business. So sort of leveraging that unifying business driver to make sure that you're always focused on solving problems, I think is huge. So Sebastian, last but not least, let's toggle over to Old Mutual. You similarly, your company has your strategy, I believe, that you refer to as your 8 battlegrounds of sorts, but I'd love for some of your thoughts on why this overarching sense of purpose is important to Old Mutual, and it helps guide you in your focus and achievements around your automation program.
Sure. So, I mean, Old Mutual's in the financial services. We started, homegrown in South Africa, and we've subsequently extended across the rest of Africa and a small part of the business in China. And, we've grown up traditionally in segments. And so whilst we were one brand, ultimately we were multiple companies within the organization. And so our customers were giving us a lot of pressure around the consistency of experience, as they may have owned products across multiple segments. And it felt like dealing with different organizations every time they engaged with us. And so that became, as part of the 8 battlegrounds. A large part of it had to do with, we initially went in with the cost efficiency play, but very strongly focused on the customer. So, that's where we decided to introduce cognitive automation, and, how we started extending it through the 8 battlegrounds, which was interweaving, cost efficiencies in a low margin environment, increasing customer satisfaction, bringing the value chain together and redesigning, and even digitalizing on the back of some of our cognitive automation.
Super, thanks for that, Sebastian. I just want to acknowledge that, Sebastian, your connection was a little patchy there, but it did correct itself. Just acknowledging the folks that are on our webinar. We see your feedback coming in about that. We'll do our best to try and course correct. So that was, again, what we call the importance of why. And I want to move on now to talk about this path to transformation. You sort of set your guideposts, even from the most senior echelons of your company. You're determining where you want to go. And we've observed that the technology, RPA essentially does what it says on the tin, if I may call it that. Even in some of we've got a forthcoming study on satisfaction with RPA software. Very interestingly, despite all of the commentary in the marketplace about challenges to scale, enterprises who work with RPA said, you know what, scaling the technology is not the challenge. It's these elements around the people and the process. And so I put up this is our HFS concept of integrated automation, which very briefly just shows right now a lot of enterprises work with piecemeal technology. We have a concept that we call our Triple A trifecta. That's what's in the middle here, but just making the point that if you couple elements of automation, such as RPA, with other elements of AI, such as maybe cognitive capture, elements of machine learning algorithms, and then add in analytics, typically smart analytics for decisioning or something along those lines, you get a much more powerful combination. They're each powerful in their own right, but they start to be more so just a greater level of capability and ability to support end-to-end processes together. But that's really a technology standpoint. When you go into this last category with this other Venn diagram, it takes us back to I'd say hearkening back to the early 1990s, the golden triangle that was sort of beloved by idle manuals and things like that. But it just reminds us that the history of technology-enabled business change is always sort of, and the hardest parts about it are really taking your people on the journey and taking your processes on the journey. So this is what we think of as really the path to transformation. But Sebastian, hoping that your audio is staying with us, but I'd really love to say, firstly, do you agree with the HFS perspective on this? That it's the struggle is perhaps not the hardest struggle is perhaps not with the technology, but it's actually with the people and process change. What do you think, Sebastian? Is this your experience at Old Mutual?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest challenge we had, right at the beginning was, the paranoia that comes with robotics. And so as we were trying to solve problems, people tended to, get into a place where they either expected the robots to do more than what humans were doing, or they would get to a point where they would think that robots could go rogue, and they didn't really understand that, if you don't know what problem you're trying to solve, a robot wasn't going to inherently solve it. And it took a long time to understand the conversations and, to get to a point where you're saying that, if you've got a problematic process, and you then use robots and you automate it, you may have a cheaper but still problematic process from a customer experience. And so, getting that through to the organization that wasn't built into a value chain, there were different offices. And often what you needed to do was get a collective agreement and then use a robot to get to this, optimal outcome. And often that wasn't an easy conversation because you needed to change upstream and downstream, and you would deal with organizational egos, You would deal with organizational change management, requirements management. And if you don't solve that with the robotics, or at least, don't compensate for it with robotics, you can end up building quite a crow's nest.
Got it. Thank you for that perspective, Sebastian. You sound great, by the way, just so we're all on the same page there. Again, it's really keeping your people in the know is always a challenge. Karsten, I'd love for you to chime in on this, sort of both on the path to transformation, being based in Germany, and I think in a lot of Europe-based organizations, you really have strong regulations around people management, but I'd love some of your thoughts on if you agree with our perspective here and how this is played out within Henkel.
Yeah, for me, I agree most with the top right or on the right one, because, well, if you have a technology you put in place, but you miss the people, then you can have the greatest technology, but without people and involving your employees, it will not work out. You will always fail, because they are still the receivers or the persons who put the input to the robot, and they need to accept the robot as an employee. It needs to be trained, needs to be upskilled, and it's part of the whole journey. So here, that's where I see you need to have all of it, people, processes as well. If the processes are not fit, or I like to say shit in, shit out, so that for me also applies to robotics. So you need
that's a technical term, right, Karsten?
Yes, definitely. But yeah, if you have a bad process and you try to fix it with RPA, I think you should start 2 stages earlier and redesign the process, make clear everybody understands where the issues are lying. Maybe it's user input, but always the people, they will improve the process and also accept it. And that's where your mission is completed and you reach a level of transformation, which you can call a transformation from my perspective.
Got it. Thank you for that. Machi, what do you think? Do you agree with all of this? And does every process need to be reinvented?
Yeah, my thoughts on this are not every process has to be reinvented, but a lot of times majority of them do, because when we design these processes, they usually were, more people involved, and the limitations like, okay, this process cannot run in the night or over the weekends. So maybe not every process should be reinvented just because, but every process deserves that you take a step back before you just go automating it because we have robots now, we can do it. Just step back, think on the bigger picture. Is this a good way to still have the process? So just to check if it needs to be transformed, and if it does, do it before just automating, because in the long term, if you want to keep the automated process for years to come, you want it redesigned so it's in accordance of the overall strategy. It solves the problem and it's not just automated so somebody else doesn't have to do it. One thing I would quickly add is about the upskilling of people that was mentioned, that when we automate a job that was performed previously by a person, now everyone sort of knows the answer that we have to upskill these people, and in a lot of companies they just do more value-adding stuff, like they are doing more investigation, they spend more time with the customer, and from what I saw in companies, that's the majority of companies is going this way, and it's good. The doomsday scenario that the robots are taking a lot of jobs, I don't think that's happening. My thought on this is also, if you automate a job that a person did, that person automatically is much more valuable to the company. Why would you ever want to get rid of him? That's a completely opposite of what we think, because when someone helps the automation team, he understands more about robotics, how the process has to be redesigned, how to work with automation. Even if he doesn't code the robot, he still understands what has to happen before the technology even comes in. So these people, a lot of times in Arla, are actually staying sort of in that task. So we automate his job as an accountant, but then he understands what's needed for automation. He helps us find other processes. He's actually learned a new skill, which is being a sort of analyst for RPA. So by automating his job, we actually taught him something very important in this age. Yeah.
Absolutely, Maciej. I mean, I love the perspective as well on the upskilling. We'll come back to that concept of the citizen developer a little bit later in the session, but again, I made the comment earlier that incorrectly automation has been viewed as it gets rid of people, but it really uplifts people. And you're right, you're absolutely giving them new skills so us humans can work alongside our digital counterparts. Peter, I'd love to, while we're on this topic of transformation, so as the regional CTO for Blue Prism, you've been there for 14 years. I mean, you literally have seen how the sausage is made, so to speak, but truly as an RPA software company, the technology piece of it, I'd love for you to share some of your views on how, from that standpoint, how do you think that Blue Prism can reasonably help support this transformation objective for its clients? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Well, let me first just build on what a couple of people have mentioned there. You know, this 10%, that is the tip of the iceberg, if you like. And we talk about transformation. It's quite a nebulous term. You know, nobody really understands what you mean when you talk about it unless you have that clear vision that we spoke about earlier. And underneath that iceberg, you've got all this complexity around people and delivery, communication, organizational change, and often RPA is sold as a magic wand. You know, it just looks seamless and easy, and it's easy to get carried away with that excitement and forget the other 90%. And I suppose the problem is, you know, transformation, because it's big, because it's complex, it's what I would call a wicked problem. If you're not familiar with that phrase, there's a nice Wikipedia article on it, but what that phrase essentially means is the kind of problem that you can't reasonably solve until you really get stuck in and attempt to solve the problem. And through doing that, you learn more about it, and then you have the right tools and knowledge to go ahead. So what gets me excited is the unique thing that RPA can offer. If we think about the common message that we see in the marketplace about democratization and participation among citizen developers and so on, is it can just play so many roles in your transformation program. So the basic stuff is this 10%. You can go ahead, use the technology and automate processes that fall in the scope of your program. But what I've also seen it do many a time is in a big program, it doesn't matter what it is, but let's say it's an SAP deployment or a core platform replacement of some kind, a digital initiative somewhere. These programs get delayed, de-scoped, they hit pockets of risk, unknown unknowns, and schedules slip. And having RPA in your back pocket can help you out of a hole. It's like your get out of jail free card to do that last minute data cleansing or migration that nobody anticipated, or to pick up the things that have been de-scoped. But my favorite element, and if you look at Blue Prism's connected RPA point of view, we talk about makers, digital entrepreneurs. It's about democratizing access across the organization. And if we circle right back to this concept of transformation being nebulous, it's a wicked problem, you need to get everybody involved. I'm referring to the people in that Venn diagram there, all the operational people as well as the IT people. And if you can get those people involved in a bottom-up way, the level of value that is delivered and the level of innovation that takes place in a transformation program is just huge. So to sum that up, I sort of see RPA as a powerhouse for innovation when it's embedded in a top-down program.
Thank you for that, Peter. And tying it back to, so your role as a software company in doing that, so it's, you have to bring great technology to market, but you also have to make sure that given your indirect model that you're working with the best partners out there to ensure that they're helping to convey this message out there, and as well as all of the great groundwork that, the groundwork you've done to really
so it's a big theme in the marketplace, to be honest. You know, if I'm candid about where we are as a company and the level of transformation that our customers are achieving, there are some great pockets and shining examples. But like you say, if we're to make that the norm in the marketplace, we, our partners, our customers, we need to work together and work out ways to make this, you know, standard and to have a common expectation, you know.
Yep, 100%. Okay, so we're going to keep pulling through some threads here, and I'd like to pop over to talk about digital change management. And Karsten, in the piece that we wrote about together on Henkel, one of the things I learned about Henkel's automation journey was the ongoing need for change management. I think change management, that perhaps unfortunately has become also a nebulous term, because is it IT change management? Is it organizational change management? What is it? It's honestly all of the above. But one of the things I was struck by in the Henkel story was about, there was just a very strong need to educate the Henkel staff, not just once, but really on an ongoing basis about what to expect from automation. It's certainly what we view as perhaps an emerging facet of digital change management, and what our slide here, by the way, gets at another HFS observation and learning from our research is that it's not digital adoption. It's, again, I suppose, a riff on the same point we've already made, which is technology is 10% of your challenge, but it's really how do you get to that change. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about the importance of so-called digital change management and how important it's been to really have ongoing communication programs with Henkel employees.
Yeah, sure. So maybe for the crowd, don't be afraid. I'm not using the slide because I'm a bit confused as well. But anyway, yeah, for Henkel, right at the beginning when we started, right, when we talked about automation, whatever automation we did, it was a confidentiality agreement on the whole project. So everybody who was working on it had to sign a dedicated letter that they do not talk about it. They had screen shields. They were sitting in specific rooms, so being hidden from everyone, that nobody gets afraid very easily in the beginning that all jobs are being gone, because that was the theme of automation in 2017 and 16. Are we going to automate? Everybody is going to be gone. So right at that point, a clear vision and strategy for the whole robotics program and automation, as we call it now, was designed and being distributed, communicated in several global meetings as well. So we have a global CEO meeting, a global CFO meeting for the functions, for the shared service centers, town halls, steering committees, team meetings, lunches, any Henkel internal intranets. We use also Yammer. So we constantly distributed our message, what we're going to do, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen as well, and what we are aiming for. So that was continuously done by all of the team members who are part of the team. At one point, we were able to talk about the process and the whole program quite openly with everyone, but still every single time we were approached by people, we had to start over again. First of all, what is robotics? So make it tangible. The people need to understand we're not taking your job. We're taking partially some tasks from you which you don't really want to do, which are repetitive, and you can get rid of it. And that way we can help you to be more productive and more satisfied in your job. On the other hand, that was on the, I call them subject matter experts who were executing the processes. But at the beginning, we underestimated a bit the change management we had to do on our IT organization and the process consulting and process owners, because they were not granting authorizations. And without authorizations, everybody is aware you cannot do anything. So we had to, again, approach them, made meetings for specific stakeholder groups, for global role owners, for example, explained them what the robots are going to do, what they're not going to do, why we do it, what's our mission, what's the aim behind, and then finally, what is their business value, to make them understand that they can gain something out of it. And yeah, I stopped counting for myself how many times I explained the terminology robotic process automation and robots, but it was at the beginning up to 50 times a day I had to explain the same phrase, make people aware what we are doing, what does it mean, and yes or no, I don't have a physical robot, but that's a good start.
Thank you for that, Karsten. And just by the way, on that point of the physical robots, I actively, Peter, I've said this to Blue Prism tons of times. I'll say it to anyone who will listen. We're not helping the uptake of automation by showing pictures of physical robots. This is software. So at our recent event in New York 2 weeks back, my colleague Ollie O'Donoghue, who is the MC for our events, he always does a segment where he says what words should be banned, sort of a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's honestly things like digital transformation, unlearn. And so he put up a picture of a robot shaking a human's hand, and he said, this picture, and that was the #1 option of what everyone said should be banned. Stop showing pictures of robots. Okay, thank you for that perspective on digital change management, and just I think one of the key things I take away from that, Karsten, is just that it's not a one-shot deal. This need for change, the need for communication, sometimes the need for reassurance, because automation anxiety is a real thing. It's an actual condition these days. It's really, really important, and it sounds like a soft concern, but it's not at all. It's something that just really gets at the heart of, if you've got employees that are at all fearful of these programs, you will not be successful. So let's move on to talk a little bit about scale. I've just put up some data from a study we did earlier this year, where it's essentially, we had a variety of different technologies on one side, which is essentially what we put under the umbrella of intelligent automation. And we asked 590 enterprises from around the world, with 100 of them being C-suite executives, really, what's the state of their adoption? And so big picture is, roughly sort of the vast majority are doing something, and that's the components on the right: piloting now, moving to production, or scaled up and industrialized. So there's great adoption going on, but in that scaled up and industrialized column, out of all these technologies that we included, arguably the most discrete of these is RPA. And very interestingly, it shows up really at the bottom of the stack. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think there have been a lot of POCs. I think there's a lot of siloed selling of RPA. But the reality exists that it's perhaps not as scaled as maybe we thought it would be. But Machi, I'd like to go to you on this, because one of the themes that we really spoke about and the piece that we did on Arla Foods was your real practical approach to RPA, essentially using the right tools in the right way. But we'd love some of your thoughts on what do you think can cause enterprises to have some of these challenges with scale, and any thoughts on maybe how your practical approach can address some of these challenges, I think would be really helpful to our attendees.
Yeah, definitely. I actually talk with a lot of companies that are implementing RPA, and a lot of issues are coming pretty much in every single one of them. And it may sound strange, but a lot of times RPA is here for quite a while. Process automation is also not something very new, but when it comes to RPA, a lot of people are doing something I call a PowerPoint implementation. So someone sold them the idea, use robots, no coding involved, you can do it very quickly. The future is here, and they buy it, and they try to implement it based on a sales pitch. They don't actually have people that understand what this is. This is only software. It works in a specific way to solve a specific problem. And a lot of times the mistake that is taken is robots is all we need. RPA will solve every single problem that you have. We don't do that in Arla. RPA is a big part. The majority of the automation that my department is doing is RPA, but it's not all, because I saw companies that are doing things with RPA that never, never, ever should be done. I saw email approval workflows done in RPA. I have no idea why, because that's completely the wrong tool for that. So if you want to have a rapid automation department, first thing is understand what RPA is. It's not a solution to every single problem. Our department, for example, have tools like workflows. We use Office 365 a lot with Microsoft Flow, with SharePoint as temporary databases for the processes. We can access the BI features from our another department that is dealing with AI and machine learning. So RPA is not the solution to everything. It works really well with a stack of other technologies, and then you can have actually a good framework of automation and not trying to solve everything with one tool. Another mistake I would say, you don't need IT. I hear this a lot, and I'm completely against it, that every single thing in RPA should be done by the business. RPA is great. It should be led by the business. It actually can stop you in some way if you involve IT too much, but it can also help you if you work with your enterprise architects. You understand the target architecture in your company. You will have access to a lot of things that you never would have known about if you would keep the RPA only in the business part. And I would say additionally, a lot of companies are doing proof of concepts, but actually, as your slide here states, not a lot of companies are able to scale, because their approach is usually, I can do 10 robots, I can do 1,000 of them. And that's not really true, because at first, when you are doing a proof of concept, you don't have the governance, you don't have a lot of boundaries. You just take tasks, automate them, you see the return on investments, you think it's great, let's continue doing that. But actually, at one point, I would advise again doing it from the start, but you have to have a governance, you have to have an operating model, you have to have structured ways of how to change the processes. You have to have a target architecture also for the processes that you will be doing the automation. You have to have a complete framework to be prepared to scale.
Yeah, you have to be ready for the future. In our own research, we see that again and again, where it's sort of the hard work seems to be done, or a lot of the time and effort is spent on, let's do our planning, let's get to implementation, as though there's going to be some dramatic big bang post-implementation. But that's when your hard work starts. And if you haven't started with that sort of purpose you articulated, Machi, of you've got to have the right infrastructure, the right governance, that right alignment between business and IT, it'll make it really hard for that to grow up.
Yeah, exactly. And just finishing, I would say some people may think that, okay, but it will slow everything down because there will be too much boundaries. That's actually, at least in our case, not true, because once we knew, okay, we want to change the processes, but our target architecture is a lot of people are using Excel, a lot of people are using desktop links. When we re-engineer processes, let's move them to SharePoint. So we can later use APIs to connect to that data and not use desktop applications. When people are collaborating, let's move them to Teams, because then we can also issue chatbots for them, and we can also use APIs for that. So with the complete framework that we have a lot of boundaries and rules, but it actually makes us work really good and faster. But if you don't prepare yourself, once you start delivering a lot of robots, the maintenance will start to catch up to you, because everything will be custom-built solution, and there will be a lot of problems. Even your business side, meaning the process around delivering robots, if it's not structured, you will have trouble to maintain even 50 robots. And 50 robots is not that a lot, actually. And I know that a lot of companies, I think Gartner report said last year that only 3% of enterprises that start with RPA was able to scale past 50 robots. But 50 robots is not a lot. And that is because I think a lot of them automate tasks, and they don't have a complete framework. They just go at it, which up to a point works, but not past it.
Well, to your point though, Machi, and I think this whole concept of because I mean, we've long said counting bots it's not really a useful metric, because there's no consistent definition of what a bot is. It varies based on, I mean, I won't even go down the rat hole of attended versus unattended bots, but there's not a distinct definition. And then there's lots of shades of gray too, when you start getting into bot utilization and such. So it's sort of a broad path there. But I think your point overall of using the right tool, and that it's very much the power of and kind of this toolbox approach. And if you're trying to use RPA for something that's not fit for purpose, like your workflow example, you may not get the success. And so there are a variety of barriers that are there. The other thing that we've seen in some of our research is that there's this RPA can definitely be extended, sort of our AAA trifecta model, by coupling it with other technologies. That's part of what you just articulated, that power of and. But we also caution that there's a lot of great baseline functionality that can be leveraged within RPA tools themselves. That you want to make sure you get to that baseline before you move on. But I'd love to do just you're all Blue Prism customers. I mean, so I think a couple of folks have asked in our Q&A really some of the decision points around there, but I'd love it if you guys could do an across the board. Machi, we can start with you because you were just talking, but give us maybe 30 seconds on why you picked Blue Prism to begin with.
Well, all of the RPA tools are doing pretty much the same thing. They are doing it in a different attitude, and this is how you should sort of choose which one do you want to go. And I would say Blue Prism is the one that is sort of in the enterprise, designed in sort of to do with enterprises which have big processes, which are pretty standardized, because Blue Prism is a little more technical than other ones, but it gives you a lot more control. And the biggest thing, why I think the biggest sort of benefit of Blue Prism, apart from other ones, is extensibility. All of the RPA tools can be extensible, but Blue Prism makes it really easy to create additional components. And to be honest, if any RPA vendors are issuing a nice feature, my team just look at it. Okay, that's a really nice thing. We spent a couple of weeks and we have it in Blue Prism because we can do that. While other RPA customers, a lot of times, oh, this RPA vendor who has something, I wish UI path automation and or Blue Prism will add it to the tool. But actually, you can extend the tools as they are. And this is a big thing in our team that we are doing, that we are extending capabilities of the tool. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits.
100%. Sebastian and Karsten, what are do you agree with Machi, and what are some of your own enterprise reasons for why you went with Blue Prism?
Sure. So, I mean, typically, we had three key considerations, and one of those was total cost of ownership. And when we had done the analysis initially, it's we had gone on RFI, RFP, and so total cost, and alignment to our technology stack, was a key consideration. And so, along with security. So at the time, when we did the security assessment around, customer data and penetration testing, Blue Prism certainly was right at the top of the bunch at the time. And then, quite importantly, if we wanted to scale, the local partnerships, using a partnership model, was who was going to help us do the proof of concept, who was going to help us do a pilot, and where we were from a location basis, that Blue Prism had the best support at the time. And so when you put those three together, it was quite a compelling case and quite an easy one in the end to go with Blue Prism.
Super, thank you, Sebastian. Karsten, you want to add in your quick thoughts on this one?
Yeah, for us, German. For us, it was basically the best fit for our own use case, which was and still is back-end automation. So we want to automate the back office. And for that one in 2017, and I still convinced still is, Blue Prism was the best choice. And governance and security for us as an assessment was the best. And on the pricing, it was the simplest license model everybody understood in a minute. These were the main points finally, and yeah, it fits the best to our use case. That was the main point for us, and the developers liked it. So
very, very, very straightforward assessment there. Thank you for that, guys. Peter, I want to go to this point with you. So this is, again, part of that same study, different data from the same study that I had up a moment ago, but just on that, the power of and, if you will, we'd asked enterprises essentially what they're doing with their different intelligent automation technologies, but are they starting to combine them to approach something that looks like the HFS Triple A trifecta? The data here is, it shows, again, a different version of there's adoption, lots of adoption, POCs, exploration, I think are all appropriate words as well, with lots of different types of intelligent automation technologies, but really just only this very scant 11% of enterprises are really finding success in combining them. And part of the reason, by the way, is that there's not a great wealth of off-the-shelf tools that do this today. But so Peter, over to you. Really like to give you a couple of moments to talk about what's Blue Prism doing to approach this challenge. You guys obviously, we noticed you acquired a little company called Thoughtonomy. You guys have opened an artificial intelligence lab. You launched Decipher for cognitive capture, although I'd love to see more about that. Tell us a little bit more about what's the roadmap and the direction here.
Yeah, sure. So I would summarize this with the words connected RPA, and I noticed one of the audience members asked the question, what does that even mean? There is material on the web if you Google the phrase connected RPA, but I'll summarize it as follows. It's a technical strategy that connects not just technologies together, be that RPA and AI in its different forms, machine learning, chatbots, and so on, but actually connects it to your company's strategy. We spoke about that earlier. It's connected to your ecosystem of people as well. So we think about human in the loop, human and digital labor working together. So let me just explain how all those different pieces fit together. You mentioned Thoughtonomy. We have our AI labs, which is producing new products such as Decipher. We talk about intelligence a lot. Cloud is another pillar of our strategy. I guess I could go on for at least half an hour about this, but let me try and condense it. Human and digital, I think this is really, really important. You mentioned your 25 tenets article the other week, which I certainly enjoyed. And one of the points it made right near the top was make the gap between attended and unattended automation seamless. You know, what we want to do is give people a cohesive platform and a vision in which, you know, we just talk about automation. Let's stop talking about technologies and tools, be it BPM, RPA, AI, human in the loop, chatbots. Let's just think about what the business outcome is, what the customer journey is rather than the process, and provide an integrated experience whereby you can weave solutions together. So a lot of what we're doing through our digital exchange, which is an online marketplace that brings third-party vendors, proven technologies, cookbooks with easy recipes for you to weave these things together, as well as new product offerings that we're looking at that make it easier for you to deploy solutions in a front office context, for example, all fall under that banner of human and digital. Cut me off if I'm going on for too long, but cloud first is another strategy. So Thoughtonomy is the first step in that, and a big stride forward, because what customers say again and again, back to my previous point, is they don't want a bag of tools. They want more in the box, and they want more that's ready to go, and they want things that are pre-packaged, easy to set up and easy to try. And that's what Thoughtonomy gives you. A quick bit of background, if anybody wasn't aware, but Thoughtonomy began life as a Blue Prism partner, and they provided hosted solutions based on Blue Prism. So their entire technology stack is predicated on Blue Prism. So it's a very nice joined up solution that they offer, and a very natural acquisition for Blue Prism to offer Blue Prism Cloud in effect. And what it brings you as a value add is all sorts of plugins and add-ons to allow you to add channels such as email, chatbots, web forms, and so on. Various forms of AI that are ready to plug in and go, be it natural language processing, classification algorithms, and so on, and various tools to accelerate your automation journey to do with design and capture of processes. And then finally, just intelligence. We have a dual strategy there. We talk about embedded and connected. So I've already talked about connected. That's about an ecosystem strategy. But again, there are really core and common problems that are shared across many customers that make sense as a core product offering. So these would be things like computer vision for surface automation, making it really easy to automate the applications that exist within your network. Things like intelligent scheduling built into the Blue Prism control room that allow you to optimize for reliability, resilience, business outcomes, optimizing SLAs, without having to have a human babysit your digital workforce all day. So there's a ton of innovation, but I hope I've summarized that successfully. It's the three pillars, human and digital, cloud first, and intelligence.
Thank you for that, Peter. I think understanding the roadmap is really important. I mean, listening to your customers, our observation at HFS has been particularly over the last 3 years or so, it's almost like the industry and all of the enterprises, including those represented on this call today, it's almost like you've been learning a new language, how to speak RPA, if you will, and increasingly how to speak broader automation. But what comes with that is knowing how to ask better questions. And so I actually think from a feedback loop standpoint, it's great for a company like Blue Prism because you get to have better conversations with your customers, and Machi and Sebastian and Karsten can ask better questions and demand better features, functionality, and extension to really meet their needs. So as ever, these webinars go super fast, and so I just want us to close out on a note where we talk about benefits. But I'd love for Machi, Sebastian, and Karsten to do just a rapid fire, what I always affectionately call the lightning round of just summarizing your benefits. Sebastian, I'm going to start with you. I noticed that in the half-year investor highlights of Old Mutual's performance, boom, right there, circled in red there. Your program made the front page, so to speak, but give us the quick hit on what benefits Old Mutual has realized thus far.
Sure. So, I mean, we measured it in a couple of ways. And the one was on our customer satisfaction, for which we use Net Promoter Score. And there was, I mean, where we had implemented robotic processes across 17 value chains, we averaged about a 30% increase in Net Promoter Score. And that was with relatively low levels of re-engineering at the time. We also managed to scale from 0 to 122 robots in the course of about 8 months in total. And so that cadence had increased. And, financially, we had delivered, we had broken even on a robotic investment within the first 12 months. Now, I mean, look, we picked really good processes to start with, so we didn't go ready, fire, aim. And so, I mean, and that's probably why it made our investor roadshow, as part of our process. And it's certainly something we're thinking in investment going forward.
Good stuff, Sebastian. Congratulations. And I love that, the ready, fire, aim. Oh, goodness. No, thank you. Karsten, how about over to you? Hit us with a quick summary of Henkel's benefits and results.
Yeah, for me, as I'm usually not the finance guy, it's really hard to quantify for me. But in terms of numbers, I think counting bots is nice, but what is a bot is another decision. So another way, we have 150 plus bots. We hired actually up to nearly 30 people for the automation journey. So we actually created jobs, not only saved them. And we have an overall good turnaround and satisfaction and good people who do automation, so process speed increases.
Super, thank you, Karsten. And last but not least, Machi, please share some of your experiences with benefits from Arla Foods.
Yeah, I will also quickly mention how we counted it and how we are counting it right now. So we have 100 processes automated. Again, this number doesn't tell anyone anything because we sort of treat one process as an end-to-end process. So one process can, for example, have 4 bots or 1. If you go just by bots in Blue Prism, we have more than 200, but that doesn't tell you anything. In the beginning, we counted in FTEs, so we could say that 76 FTE worth of workload was automated. But then again, we create new processes and we execute bots more than people are doing it. So we know that if we would pull the plug from all of the robots, we would have to hire 150 people to perform the processes. So the way we are counting right now is money. 2 million euros is 2.1 exactly is right now the savings that we do yearly from the processes that are in production. This is the way we are counting, because sometimes we do a simple bot that will save 0.2 manual work, FTE worth of manual workload, but it will solve a business problem that will save, for example, 50,000 euros a year, because we are not getting fined or something is performed quicker. So 2.1 million euros is the number we use.
Yeah, there's nothing like being able to just get to a number quantification like that, Maciej, so thank you for that. But I mean, I think the other key theme, and what all of you said in one way or another, is that you're really being enabled to do more with less. I always say, just from a benefits tracking standpoint, what I perhaps don't hear enough about is this idea that even if you just use automation to plug your natural attrition gap, which is typically somewhere around an average of 15% annually, if you're able to actually not have to backfill positions and do more with less with automation, which is sort of the direction the market is heading in, that's a gigantic benefit. So of course, we'd end up out of time because we had such a rich conversation. I'll just note to wind down this webinar now, obviously HFS Research, we're a research house. We do loads of research on this. Just wanted to point out that there's a great range of additional research in addition to the 3 POV case studies on the enterprises on the call today. There's a variety of other contextual research available through hfsresearch.com. I'm going to end it here because we're out of time for Q&A, and I know everybody has to get to their next meetings, but just a commitment to all of you who have actually took your time to submit questions to us. We'll go through those, and for those of you whose email IDs we have that will permit us to reach out to them, we'll come back to them with answers to those questions. But please join me in thanking our great panelists today, Sebastian, Maciej, Karsten, and Peter. We really enjoyed your inputs and hope that we were able to provide some interesting thoughts on getting beyond the hype to what enterprises are doing and how you're scaling your automation programs. Thanks very much, everybody. And this concludes our webinar. I hope everybody has a great rest of the day.